Hey guys, I'm Erik Jones, driving number 43 for Richard Petty Motorsports. Here today with a couple of my classic cars. And we're gonna go ahead and check those out, as I'm a car collector and car enthusiast myself. So we went ahead and teamed up with STP to learn a little bit about more car culture and kind of what I like to collect and what got my passion started in cars. All right guys, so I figured we would start with one of the newest additions to my collection. It's a 1962 Corvette, first C1 Corvette for me, which C1 was from 53 to 62, which this is the final year for the C1 before they went to the Stingray body style that most people know really well. As a kid, we were in the Corvette business, and growing up, I always thought the 62 was just the best year for the C1. It's kind of the cleanest of all the C1s. It doesn't have quite as much of the chrome and the flash as some of them do, but I wasn't really into that look too much. I kind of like the classic look without the big toothy grille and a little less chrome just in general on the car. So you got the quad headlights, which was from, I think, 58 up till 62. Never made any hardtop C1 Corvettes. They were all either convertibles or removable hardtops, which I do have the removable hardtop for this one. It's been a good car, 4-speed manual, pretty fun to drive. The C1s are a little bit unusual. They're straight axle cars. The rest of Corvettes from 63 on were independent rear suspension, so it's a little bit quirky on the road, but it makes it for kind of a fun driving experience. All right, we'll move on and talk a little bit about the interior on these cars. A pretty classic look for them in general. It's kind of interesting. You think about the C1 Corvette. So this car was first sold in 53, which means obviously it was being designed in the 40s. So the people in 1940 and 50, I'm assuming, are a little bit smaller than the modern person today. So the interior is pretty tight in this car, but a cool dash layout. You look at it and you've really got all the controls right in front of you here, obviously, and you got all your gauges. And really just a simple car on the interior for the most part. You got a few of these switches which look a little bit, I guess you could say, intimidating at first, because none of them are really labeled. You kind of just guess what they are, but they only do a few things as far as windshield wipers, and there's actually a big vent down here that opens that up on the hood, which will push a bunch of air into the interior for you. I guess that's air conditioning in 62. We'll go ahead and take a look under the hood. As far as everything goes, it's pretty straightforward. It's still, as you can see, got the original generator on it. That is your alternator. In 62, they didn't really totally have that developed yet. They were generators then, but the original, or one of the original Delco generators on it, which is pretty cool. And then obviously still got the original manifolds and everything on it. Everything is pretty straightforward and stock under here, so it's been cool. I like that. I'm not really into the resto mod stuff. I know that's been pretty big in recent years. I kind of like the really original cars and how they came from the factory. You know, I think that's a cool experience if you can drive something like it was in 1962 and what people were buying back then as, you know, one of the top sports cars in the world and what they really were. So I think that's pretty neat. So the next car we got in my collection is a pretty special car to me. It's a 1965 Corvette and has been in my family for quite a few years in total. There was a period of time that another gentleman owned it down in Florida. My dad originally bought this car in 2000, I think 2 was when he originally bought it down at an auction in Florida, and had this car up until about 2007, 2008 maybe. And he would store this car every year at Paragon Corvette where he was working at and running. And a gentleman came in and saw it and offered to buy it on the spot, and he sold it. So I was a little shocked, to say the least. He did it honestly to help us keep racing and do some stuff that we needed to do going forward. We were trying to make a move into a little bit bigger series, and obviously with that comes a little bit more money. So that helped out selling this car. So I had always wanted to buy this car back for him. Unfortunately, we lost my dad a few years ago, but I was still able to find the car and get it back, which was really special to me and really to my family too. But an awesome car. 65, I think, is a pretty great year for C2s. Obviously, they came out in 63 with the iconic split window, which everybody knows pretty well, and that's really a desirable year. But 65 is cool in its own ways. It's the only year that has on the B-post these little vents. It's kind of how you can tell 65 really quickly, is those vents on the B-post. It's a small block car, 327, so it doesn't have the big block hood. 65 was the first year for the big block. with the 396, and then 66 and 7, they went to the 427. So this has been by far probably the best driving and running classic car I've ever had. The only thing I've ever had to do with this car, and I've owned it now for almost 6 years, is change the oil. Other than keeping up with routine maintenance, it's I believe pretty original. I know it's a numbers matching car from the motor and transmission, so that's always really cool to have. And it's been a great car. When I got it back from the guy who owned it, it had different wheels and tires on it. It had some knockoff wheels on it, and it didn't have the side exhaust on it anymore either. He had taken the side exhaust off. So I put the car back to how it was when we had it, which it had these tires. These are actually hubcaps on the just regular steel wheels, and then put the side exhaust back on it to get it how it was when I was a kid. And it also had, and we'll show it in a minute, in the interior, it had a teak steering wheel, which is pretty rare in these cars. It was an option from the factory. I believe it was about a $15 option. And if you want to go try to buy a teak wheel now, if you got some time, go on Google and look up a teak Corvette wheel. They're not very cheap, so they're pretty hard to find these days. But did find one and get back in there, which was awesome. So the car is actually 100% like it was when we owned it and had it, which is pretty special to me. I can talk about the color really quick. This car is Nassau blue on blue. Nassau blue was the most popular color in 1965, so there's a lot of Nassau blue Corvettes out there. I'm not sure how many of them are left. Probably a lot of them have been resprayed and repainted, but this was the original color for this car. Right off the bat, a lot more room in these cars, which is nice, and which is part of why a lot of people do prefer the C2s a little bit over the C1s. Or just roomier and more comfortable as far as just driving. If you were going to drive a car every single day, you know, the C2 is just a better driving car in general. We still have this pull-out brake lever for the parking brake, which was a carryover from the C1, and they did this all the way up until 66 when they went to a more traditional mechanical parking brake that was in the center console. I actually like the pull-out brake lever because you still have your center console open and roomy. It's pretty cool. I always loved the dash layout in these cars. I think they're really taken after some aviation cues for sure. If you look at it, you got the really big speedometer and really big tachometer right in your face, and then obviously you have the smaller auxiliary gauges for your fuel, water, battery, oil, all that stuff. And then obviously the key being on the dash is cool. And then you still got some of your similar levers in this car, all of them being vents that you can open up. No air conditioning in this car either, so you had to get air in some way, and through the vent was about the only way. Great running motor, definitely one of the best running motors I've ever had in a classic car. It's smooth, it fires right up every time. It's not cold-blooded, it'll run right off the bat. Remember we were talking about the generator and the C1s. Have a typical alternator on this car. They went to these. Everything's just a tick more modern in the C2. Obviously you can tell there's a lot more room under here in the engine bay as they were getting ready to put the big blocks in them in 65, 6, and 7. So they had to kind of widen these things out, make some space. But I really like the small block. You know, I think it's a great running car, especially driving around town. You don't have the overheating problems as much. And it's been, like I said, just a great car for me. All right, and we got a later arrival, the 69 Corvettes here. It was up at my other shop, so we had to get it over here. But I bought this car when I was 17. It didn't look anything like this. I was just wanting a classic car and started looking around, and a guy at Paragon, as I was talking about earlier, had bought this car a long time ago, and it was kind of in shambles. It was a little rough. It needed definitely a full frame-off restoration. His name was Tony, and he had started doing some work on it. He got to a point where it had just kind of sat for a few years, and he was ready to move on from it and kind of put the project to somebody else. And so I ended up buying the car. It was enticing. It was an original big block 427 car, 390 horse car. Numbers matching, had the original motor, transmission, rear end. So that was obviously great for me, looking for something. It had an NOS frame put on it, which is new old stock. So Paragon had a few C3 frames sitting around their shop, and we ended up putting one of the last ones that they actually had on this car. So it's got basically a brand new chassis on it. The one that was on it was pretty rusted out, seen some better days, so we went ahead and put that one on it. And then from there, went through a full restoration. I sent it over to a guy out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, Bonafide Customs, and they ended up doing the full restoration on this car. Body, frame, interior, you know, basically this car is as it would have been brand new in 1969. This is how it would have rolled off the line. I wanted everything to be pretty stock. Changed a couple things, brakes and some other stuff just to make it a little bit more drivable, I guess, day to day, and a little bit more comfortable in modern traffic. We're here in Charlotte, North Carolina. A lot of traffic in Charlotte, North Carolina if you've been here before. So you got to have some things just as far as being a little bit safe and not getting yourself in a bad spot with some of the things. So we changed some of that around, but other than that, the car's really stock. It's been a great car. You know, I drive it, I put some miles on it. You know, some people see this car and they can't believe I drive it because it is such a nice restoration, and there was a lot of time put into it and a lot of work to get it to look like this, but I do drive it around town and enjoy it. You know, I think that's what cars are for. You're supposed to drive them around and get your use out of them. At the end of the day, they are just cars. We all love them, but you got to drive them, have fun with them. So we'll go ahead and pop in the interior of this car. I forgot to mention, this car is now Cortez Silver. It was originally a Riverside Gold car. We were just talking about that off camera. That's an okay color. It's to each their own. Some people love it, some people hate it. I went with Cortez Silver. But we'll go ahead, talk about the interior of this car. You talk about the C1s are pretty tight, and then the C2s actually have some good room in them. And then you get into C3 and they're pretty snug again. This is, you know, a pretty tight compartment. They changed some stuff around when they went to these C3s. It's actually the same chassis as the C2, but they went ahead and moved around some of the seating position, driving position. The weight distribution's a lot different on these cars, but really cool dash layout. I loved, when I was a kid, this was probably my favorite dash layout in a car. I always loved the gauges in the center here. I think they kind of took some cues from the Camaro where they did that, and you have them all right in front of you. I think that's such a cool look. And then the really deep set, and again, really big tach and speedometer, all analog and manual, which obviously is pretty cool. 4-speed car. I've always had a affinity, I guess, for manual transmissions and Corvettes. Probably from my dad. He never could believe when somebody would buy an automatic one. So I've always stuck with that, and definitely thought the 4-speeds are the way to go. Got the original Muncie transmission in it. It does not have air conditioning. None of my cars have air conditioning, which in Charlotte, North Carolina in the summer in a fiberglass body can be a little challenging, but I don't mind it too much, I guess. I'm young, and maybe it keeps me prepped up for being in the race car on a hot weekend. But other than that, pretty stock in here. It's actually for second year for the T-Top, 68. They came out with the T-Tops, and this car's got them. I've had them off once or twice. You know, T-Tops, some people, again, love them, hate them. I think they're cool. Take them off and throw them in there's actually storage for them here in the back. Another cool thing a lot of people don't know probably about these cars is the back window actually comes out. You can take the back window out. There's a slot here for storage for the back window itself, and you can really get a, you know, pretty much a convertible, but still with the hard top look, which I like a lot better than the Roadster look. So kind of cool here too. They have they do this a lot still on Corvettes now, but first generation where they would list horsepower, cubic inches, torque, and compression ratio right here on the center console, which I think is a cool look. Just kind of neat you have that in here. And then the fiber optics were something kind of neat for the C3s. You can actually, you see here, we have left tail lamp, license plate, and all the lamps, and they actually shine through and show you when you're hitting on those. It transmits fiber optics through, and you can see and make sure your lights are working. You know, kind of one of those things, I'm sure in 1969 that was cutting edge, right? So it was kind of neat to see, and it's cool to see that stuff now, especially in a car. But that's about as far as interior goes. A lot of vacuum operated stuff on this car, which is unique for C3. The headlamps are vacuum. The wiper panel door right here is vacuum operated. So there's a lot of kind of neat wiper stuff, vacuum related stuff on here, which is kind of cool to watch. A really nice job though here on the restoration, as you can see, really stock appearing. There's a couple of things we've changed to make it a little bit more livable day to day. Obviously this car came with a point system, and if anybody's ever worked with points before, they can be kind of a pain. You have to adjust them a lot, and when they're working good, but when they go a little bit out of sync and you have to set your points again, kind of a process. So there's electronic ignition on it now, which is obviously nice, but original carburetor, manifold motor. I had a little bit of work done to the motor just to kind of pep it up. 390 horse is for a big block. That was the low side. 390 was the lowest power you could get for that year. So I went ahead and had them do a few things to the motor just to liven it up a little bit. And it's got headers on it right now. Probably going to change that out and put the manifolds back on it. It's a very, very loud car right now with the headers and the side exhaust. I've got actually, these cars came with more of a muffler style exhaust for the side exhaust instead of the chambered side exhaust like a C2 would have, and I put the chambered side exhaust on it because I thought it would be cool to have it loud, and it turned out being a little aggressive. So got to back off on a couple of those things, but other than that, you know, been a good car for me. For a big block, it runs really cool. You know, I know a lot of people with these big blocks have some trouble overheating, especially being in traffic, and like I said, in Charlotte here in the summer, it's 90, 100 degrees, and these things can get pretty hot, but this one's been good. We do have a aftermarket aluminum radiator in it, you can see there, but you know, it's ran really good for me and never really had too many problems with it.